The Prime Minister of India is in Berlin, the first stop on his three-nation European tour, holding his first in-person meeting with the Chancellor Olaf Scholz. The Indian Prime Minister received a warm welcome at Berlin's Brandenburg airport. He received a ceremonial welcome in the German capital as he inspected the Guard of Honour with Chancellor Scholz. He also met and interacted with jubilant scenes of the Indian diaspora in Berlin. The German Chancellor plans to invite India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi to be a special guest to the Group of 7 G7 Leaders Summit in Germany next month, part of an effort to forge a broader international alliance against Russia. Chancellor Scholz welcomed Modi for talks in Berlin, following by a joint German-Indian cabinet meeting. But the focal points of the high-level meetings is the bilateral cooperation, also the situation in Ukraine, which could well come up during these discussions. One of the main agendas during the meeting would also be the post-COVID-19 economic recovery. Modi will also address a business roundtable with the goal of energising industry-to-industry cooperation between Germany and India. From Berlin, the Indian Prime Minister will then travel to Copenhagen on May the 3rd, where he will take part in a bilateral meeting with Prime Minister Frederiksen and join a Nordic Council with other North European nations. Now, we have our principal diplomatic correspondent joining us live from Berlin. Also live for us today in the German capital is Trent Murray. Let's start with Siddhant, just to give us a breakdown of Narendra Modi's itinerary and his plans during this German leg of his European tour.
Well, it's a packed visit for the Indian Prime Minister. We have seen how he was welcomed by the Indian diaspora, and the Indian diaspora forms a key component of his engagements today. Later in the day, he will be addressing an event which has been organized by the Indian diaspora. And this has been part of his foreign visits abroad. So we will see more such meetings with the diaspora. But it is hard diplomacy as he sits down with the new German Chancellor for the 6th intergovernmental consultations. This is a format of engagement between the Indian Prime Minister and the German Chancellor on a range of issues, and meets every 2 years alternatively between India and Germany. The last such intergovernmental consultations was in New Delhi in the year 2019, when the then German Chancellor Angela Merkel had travelled to India. So that remains the key focus areas in terms of itinerary. But above all, the focus will be on how these two countries can work together at various international issues, including the United Nations Security Council reforms and the outcome, or perhaps the consequences of the Russian invasion of Ukraine.
Thanks, Siddhant. Let's pick up now with Trent. Just to give us some of the more broader outlines of the significance of the relationship between Germany and India.
Yeah, well, this is a very significant moment, really, a very significant meeting, because what you have for the first time in person is the new leader of Europe's largest country meeting with the existing leader of the world's biggest democracy. And as you might imagine, Ross, there is plenty for the two to discuss. Now, I think the main headline really that we have to look at this morning is this kind of extraordinary honour, if you will, that Olaf Scholz has extended to Prime Minister Modi by inviting him to the G7 meeting next month, I should say. Those invitations don't come lightly outside that group of 7 clubs. So that is something that is really being heralded here in Berlin as a pretty important signal of Olaf Scholz's intentions to work closer with India. We also understand today there will be discussions around easing immigration rules for skilled workers from India to come and work here in Germany. There is that joint cabinet meeting as well, with high-level representatives of both governments sitting down to discuss some of the issues of the day. And we also understand that Olaf Scholz is quite keen for German defence firms to try and look look at working more closely in the Indian market in order to try and provide Delhi with some alternatives to Russian weapons, which of course are quite common in terms of imports to the Indian military. So a lot to discuss here on day one of this tour. There will be a pretty big gathering later tonight with members of the Indian diaspora community coming together, a couple of thousand people we expect. So a lot to do in this short time, but it seems that everything is working in lockstep here, both schedules going to plan as the two sides look to discuss some of those key issues, including, of course, the war in Ukraine.
Thanks very much. Our correspondent there in Berlin, Trent Murray, and also our chief diplomatic correspondent, Siddhant Sabal, speaking to us live from Berlin as well.